Listen, there's a reason most drama in League of Legends happens in the bot lane. The ADC thinks they should play one way, the support has a completely different plan, and before you know it, both players are spam pinging each other, calling each other boosted, fully convinced the other one is just totally griefing. Truthfully though, bot lane, it can be super frustrating. Other roles have way more control over how their own lane plays out, while the ADCs and supports have to work together in order to win the lane, which, let's face it, is asking a lot from players that have just met literally just a few seconds ago. And to top it all off, there's so many ADCs, there's so many supports, and there's so many bot lane combinations that you can face that it can literally feel impossible to know how you should even really be playing that matchup to begin with. But don't worry, there's some simple and easy to follow strategies that you can use in order to ensure that you always know how to win your lane, and that, of course, above all else, don't require any coordination with your partner to pull off, just as long as you're doing what we're about to teach you in this video. And it all starts with the single most important question in every single game you are going to play, and that, of course, is what kind of support is on each team. Support champions are built to function with a very low gold income, which means especially in the early lane phase, their abilities and their kits as a whole are far more impactful than an ADCs are. For example, compare something like a Nautilus landing as Q to a Jinx landing her W, or a Caitlyn landing her Q compared to a Pyke landing as Q into E combo. You get the idea. Like it or not, supports by and large will always have the biggest impact on how the lane plays out, and it's up to the ADC to do their best to try and enable them. How you do that is by mastering how to play with the two different support archetypes, that being melee engaged supports and ranged supports, because each one of them will want to play the lane in a completely different way depending on what you're playing with and what you're facing, of course. So we're going to be covering melee versus ranged here, ranged versus melee, and as well as the mirror matches too. Oh, and do make sure to stick around until the end, as the skills you're going to learn in each of these sections are not only crucial for both ADCs and supports to learn, but they can be applied across every single bot lane matchup as well. So let's kick things off with melee versus range. Step one is simple. Focus on surviving the first few levels, because if you're playing with a melee support up against a ranged support, levels 1 through 3 are always going to be the toughest part of your lane. And this is because the majority of engaged supports require hitting level 2 or even level 3 before they even become a champion. Yet still, this is where a lot of ADCs and even supports do end up trolling themselves and throwing their lane instantly. It's kind of hard to watch. Exactly like this Emerald, Ziggs, and Alistar here. From level 1, Ziggs is walking up and trying to contest the first wave, throwing Qs and trying to secure the push. Ali's even trying his best to participate by headbutting the Senna away. There's only one issue with this. They're always going to lose this early, as two ranged champions, and yes, even if one of them is Yuumi, will always be able to pressure them off the wave for the first few levels. But by hitting the wave and contesting, Ziggs is actually the one griefing here, and there's a few reasons for this. First is that rather than pushing into them, it causes the wave to stay neutral in the middle of the lane for a longer time, in turn causing them both to get zoned for longer and lose out on more CS and potentially more XP. Second, you have to walk up more in order to get farm, making you vulnerable to taking more poke damage and losing more health. Now, fortunately for Ziggs, he is cheating a little bit here and playing a mage bot, otherwise he would have griefed himself and Alistar even more. But truth be told, educational content on YouTube, just by and large as a whole, has done bot laners a huge, massive, gaping disservice, as every single guide you're going to watch on YouTube just constantly goes on and on and on about how important hitting level 2 is. But for melee versus range, you kind of have to just be okay with playing patiently and letting the wave push into you. In fact, having the push can, in a lot of cases, actually be a disadvantage with a melee support. And I get it sounds strange, but hear me out on this. Take this Platinum game. For whatever reason, Zyra is just completely AFK here, and we've all been there. And don't worry, we're going to be getting into how to play with and as a range support in just a little. Ezreal focusing more on trying to poke, he loses the push to Zeri. They hit level 2 first, but now what? The wave's stuck in a position where Ezreal and Zyra can just play safe in front of their turret, poke, and not have to ever worry about Maokai engaging, leaving him basically useless despite getting that level 2 first. But let's now take a look at how it should be done, this time from a Masters game. Senna and Morg obviously get the push here, but this time Corki and Alistar play it correctly. they back off, they sit under turret, and they wait for the wave to come into them. And as they didn't hit the wave at all, only the last hit. This does happen pretty quickly, with everything but the first 3 melee crashing into turret, allowing Corki to pick up the farm safely. Only now, though, they're in the exact position they want to be. Once the levels equalize and Alistar hits level 2, he's finally a champion and can start to fish for the engage, flashing on the Morgana and headbutting her into turret when she steps up for an easy kill. But while obviously I get it, this was specific to Alistar, the point here isn't that every melee support can do this exact play. The point is that by surviving the early levels, being okay with conceding, giving up farm, and letting the wave push into you, you put yourself in a position where one good engage can instantly win you the lane. Because even if Alistar doesn't knock Morg into turret here, him and Corki are still heavily favored in that all-in, and with an entire lane to run them down, any good engage from almost any melee support likely ends in a kill, or at least summoner's forced. But now that you understand why surviving the first few levels is so important when playing with or as a melee support, the next step is going to be learning how to navigate every other situation you're going to find yourself in as a bot laner. Now, luckily, our ADC and support essentials courses, they're designed to walk you through every stage of the game. And if you're an ADC, our 4-part course covers everything that you need to dominate the bot lane, from learning how to win every trade, the must-know Season 16 timers and wave control tricks that give huge advantages in lane, and the exact rules that you need to be following for when to fight, when to recall, and even how to still win lane with a trolling support that only exists to troll your wave. We have all been there. We also cover the mistakes that 99% of ADCs make that cause them to fall behind in the mid game. Before then, finally covering the art of team fighting and the tips and tricks challenger ADCs abuse to always deal the highest damage possible. And look, if you're a support main, our 5-part course walks you through everything you would ever need to know to take matters into your own hands. From hidden wave control techniques challenger players use to 1v9 the lane phase, to the trading mistakes every support below masters are making right now. There's even entire chapters dedicated to roaming, where you're going to learn the secrets to impacting the map and ensuring you're always in the right place at the right time. And so much more than that too. And best of all, if you don't climb at least 5 divisions while actively using our service, then you're going to get every penny back. Check it out today using the link in the pinned comment or the description below. But now, let's get back to the video. While playing patiently for the first few levels is super important, the payoff once they hit level 2 to 3 is only possible if you follow our second step though, which is preserve your health. Having the wave on your side of the map is great for enabling all-ins, but only if you have the health to do it. It's no secret that a low health engage support is literally, let's just say it's useless. If they go in when they're low, they're just going to die and never be able to live long enough for the extended all-in that they really need, which goes without saying, it severely limits your ability to win lane. But what many ADCs really don't think about is that their health bar matters just as much as supports. If they're too low health to fight, then the engage support again cannot engage. So obviously, either of you being low health is something you always want to avoid. This Emerald Senna and Rel here is the perfect example, as they both do a fantastic job of showing us exactly what not to do. Again, rather than just letting the wave push into them, Senna is contesting here, and we already know why this is bad. But Rel is just as much to blame here too, as rather than just following our second rule and preserving her health, she gets angsty, and she looks for that level 1 engage into the enemy minions here, causing her and Senna to both end up below half health. But with the levels equalized now, the wave where they want it, and Sona completely out of mana, Rel does end up finding another engage, with Senna even following up with her W. Only there's one issue here, because they're both now so incredibly low that rather than chasing for the kill, Rel ends up dying and Senna barely survives. And this goes hand in hand with playing patiently, what we talked about earlier. Because you're at a disadvantage early, you have to be okay with going down and farm. Preserving your HP is far more important than picking up a few extra CS, as long as you're still staying in experience range. And a good trick to remember here is that caster minions are the hardest minions to last hit safely, but they also give the least amount of gold. To put it into perspective, even if the lane was going so badly that you missed every single caster minion for the first 5 minutes, which will just absolutely never happen, that's still barely even 300 gold. And we can see that executed perfectly right here, where we have Triss Leona up against Nami Ashe. Due to that range disadvantage, Nami's able to play super aggressive, bullying Leona and Triss off the wave. Now pay attention to the caster minion right here though. Should Triss go for it? Of course not. She's going to lose far too much health to get just 14 gold, so she rightfully just gives it up. Same on the next wave. Both Triss and Leona play safe and preserve their health, as there's absolutely no way they're going to be able to contest the level 2. So they sit back and let let it push into them. And the second the levels equalize, Leona finds the engage and they get the all-in from full health that they needed, picking up an easy double as they have the entire lane to run them down. But after a masterclass on both restraint and not losing your entire health bar for absolutely no reason, there's one more rule that you have to follow for when playing with an engage support: controlling the wave. Now, we have touched on this already just a little bit, but engage supports do need the wave to either be neutral or on their side of the lane in order to play the game. If you mismanage the wave, pushing too much, or hitting it for no reason, then you're making your support completely useless. Not only that, but you also want to thin the wave enough so that your support can go in as well, as especially during the early game. Even if your support does find an engage, you won't win if you're at a massive minion disadvantage. Take that Platinum Maokai from earlier that we watched, who, if you remember, in the early levels was completely useless. But watch what happens this time when Zeri properly manages her wave. Rather than continuing to push, she lets it come into her instead, making sure to always thin the wave so if they do find the engage, they won't lose because of the extra minion damage. That same useless Maokai that we watched earlier even holds the caster minions just outside turret range, keeping the wave on his side of the lane for longer. And because they also followed both Step 1 and Step 2, surviving the early levels, avoiding poke, and preserving their HP, Maokai does finally get to hit level 3 in a lane state where he can actually play the game. At which point, the second Zyra mispositions, he finds the perfect engage and gets Zeri the easiest kill of her life. But of course, this Zyra did play the lane about as badly as she possibly could have. So let's flip the script here and make a point. Because now that you understand what the melee support wants to do, playing the range support side becomes a whole lot easier, as your entire job is to deny that setup. So let's talk about the 2 rules you need to follow when you're playing with a range support into melee. Rule number 1, keep a minion advantage. Remember how you enabled your melee support by letting the wave push into you? Well, with a range support, you want to do the exact opposite. Your goal is to secure the push, so it's harder for them to engage, as they're going to take too much minion damage when doing so. Now look, I already know what you're thinking when you hear that. Well, it's just doing exactly what they want, right? You'll push, the lane will be on their side of the map, and they can look for an engage. Well, listen to me. The difference here is you don't want to just mindlessly hit the wave and over push. You want to maintain the minion advantage while using your double range advantage to punish every last hit possible, which brings us to rule number 2. Focus on short trades and poke. Having the minion advantage helps massively with this, as not only is it easier and safer to move up, but many range supports have skill shots in their kit, and with your opponents having less minions to hide behind, makes it far easier for them to land. Remember what the melee support side wants. They want to survive the early levels. They want to preserve their health and let that wave come into them. It's going to be up to you and your support to ensure that that is not possible. And this is where most ADCs and supports go wrong when playing range versus melee, as despite having that range advantage, they're still scared of a potential engage, causing them to play way too passive. We can see a perfect example of how this should look in the Masters game here, where we have a pretty mismatched duo of Trist Vel'Koz up against Xayah Rakan. But first, real quick here, we just added bot lane synergy list to SkillCapped's builds, our completely free build site. Like I said, it's free, so whether you play ADC or whether you play support, you can instantly find the best picks to complement your lane partner. And on top of that, every champion page includes items, it includes builds, filtered through our challenger experts and one tricks. So rather than just giving you the stats like any other YouTube video out there, you're actually going to learn why it's good, on top of always having the newest tech, the most optimal runes, and the best item setups before anybody else does. And with our handwritten challenger insights for every champion filled with tips and tricks, you're bound to learn something new, even on your main. But back to it. Pay attention to how aggressively Vel'Koz is positioned in these early levels, basically standing right on top of his melee minions. Every time Xayah walks up for CS, or Rakan even thinks about stepping forward, Vel'Koz and Tristana, they're both looking to punish with autos. And even when Rakan does land his W and finds the engage onto Vel'Koz, not only is he taking extra minion damage, but they're still in those early levels where without their full kits, they just don't have enough all-in damage to kill him. So as Rakan is forced to walk away as the wave pushes, Vel'Koz just gets to keep on poking, which is only made easier by them having no minions to hide behind, turning what might feel like a scary engage into an even trade, which heavily favors Vel'Koz and Tristana, because Rakan and Xayah are the ones who need to preserve their HP for the all-in, like we talked about earlier. If they're trading health evenly before they even hit their real engage window, they are already losing the lane. And Vel'Koz knows there's nothing Rakan can do at this point, so just walks up behind the wave again, baiting him to come and trade. And meanwhile, as Trist has been doing a good job focusing solely on slow pushing instead of over pushing the wave, they end up building such a big minion advantage that once the levels equalize, even if Rakan does go in, him and Xayah are too low and there's too many minions to go and all in, meaning they can just get a free base off for an early item and health advantage while Xayah and Rakan are just stuck in lane, or even just continue to harass them under turret taking plates. And just a quick interjection here, because I know you're probably thinking, if we're permanently pushing, are we just asking to get ganked? Well, not if you do it properly. In fact, this can be huge for your team because you're constantly applying a ton of pressure and forcing the enemy jungler to respond. And with a ward in the enemy try and another in the Phaelite, it becomes incredibly hard to gank you before you see it coming. But this is not just the support's job. The ADC has to help place vision too. Once you crash that wave, once they're stuck clearing it, get some deep wards. But if we go back and contrast that to our Zyra and Ezreal from earlier, watch how they're both playing here. Neither are positioned aggressively, neither are playing for the push, and neither of them are using their range advantage correctly in the early levels, meaning not only are they letting Zeri thin that wave for free, losing their huge minion advantage as the wave pushes away from them, but as they're also not poking and forcing short trades, by the time the wave gets to where Maokai wants it, we already know what ends up happening. And there's one final rule to this that I want to talk about, which honestly, once you understand, it might be the most important rule in the entire lane: using your health bar as a resource. And step 6 of our trading course inside of our Season 16 Essentials summarizes this concept so beautifully. Now, there's one more concept that ties all of these trading fundamentals together, and it's one that a lot of supports, well, they just never really think about. Your health bar as a resource, not something to protect, not something to keep full, a resource that you should be expending to gain advantages in lane. See, here's how you should think about bot lane. You and your ADC share a combined health pool, almost like a power gauge for the lane. If both of you are full HP and both of your opponents are at full HP, the lane is even. But if your ADC loses half their health and the enemy duo both lose half theirs as well, while you're still at full health, your joint power gauge as a duo is still higher than theirs. Take this game here. Smolder walks up, gets flash engaged on by the Leona, and ends up losing a ton of his health. Brand and Smolder trade back. Get some good damage as Leona backs out, but still, Smolder is dangerously low, while Brand is basically full health. This is where most supports make a huge mistake, as they're going to see this and think, okay, we're losing lane, we need to play safe. But this is exactly where that power gauge comes into play, as Brand and Smolder combined technically have more health. It's just up to Brand to use that. So watch what he does here. He walks up and plays insanely aggressive, and despite that good engage by Leona and MF, they're now actually the ones behind in the lane, as Brand understood that concept and knows that he's high enough health that even if Leona did engage on him, they would just lose that trade, as Smolder could still freely just attack. So he's able to completely zone them off the way. And this works the other way around as well too. If you're the one who's taken damage and your ADC is healthy, then it's going to be on them to be stepping up while you play further back. And by the way, there's even more of that video, as well as 6 more in just the trading chapter of our 5-part support essentials course. But look, at this point, you have to be wondering, what do you do in mirrors? Well, let's start with ranged versus ranged here. A lot of the same concepts when playing range versus melee do still apply, but just for different reasons. First off, securing the push and getting a minion advantage is still going to be the #1 goal. As in range versus range, rather than worrying about all-ins, it's all about building small health and small CS advantages, which is primarily done through having a minion advantage. As again, if you have the bigger wave, it's not only easier for both the ADC and support to walk up and guarantee favorable trades, but it's also much harder for your opponents to dodge, as they have far less minions to hide behind, while also being more difficult for them to walk up or land their own spells or poke. Like here, notice how Zyra wants to land her Q, but with MF and Karma having the bigger wave, she can't really continue to walk up safely in order to land it, meaning they can just step back and dodge. But then compare that to Karma and MF as they win the push. Not only can they walk straight at them, but there's no minions for them to hide behind, so they tank the full Karma empowered Q and a ton of damage from MF. Only Karma and MF, despite getting this lead, throw it almost instantly, breaking rule number 2. Match your partner's positioning. This is a concept that's important in every type of bot lane matchup, but you can really see the effects of it in range versus range, with the players knowing how to abuse it having a huge advantage in lane. This is something called parallel positioning. The general premise of this is that during lane and when looking to trade, you and your ADC should always aim to be side by side. If they move up, you move up. If they move back, you move back. And what this helps to do is prevent situations like we just saw with Karma. Misfortune clicks back once once the wave comes in, only Karma clicked forward at the same time, and despite that hugely winning trade, actually ends up with her and MF coming out behind in overall health. The easiest way to envision this is like a triangle. You and your partner want to be at the base of that triangle. And what sets good bot laners here apart from bad bot laners is that they'll constantly adapt their positioning in the lane to force these 2v1s with that triangle. We can see this perfectly in this Masters game here. Ashe and Nami hit level 2 first with the push advantage, but Soraka instantly steps back and baits Ashe forward. This forces Ashe into a 2v1 while Nami can't actually hit anyone, and Soraka and Jinx keep kiting back parallel. So even with the early advantage, Ashe has to flash, then Nami becomes the one caught at the point of the triangle and has to flash too. That's how powerful this concept is. Even from losing positions, it can completely flip the lane if you play around it. And best of all, even if your opponents are standing side by side, there's still angles you can approach from that can gain you an advantage. And at the highest levels of play, although it is subtle, you're going to notice players adapting their positioning constantly to force these favorable trades. But yeah, I get it. I know this relies on your partner, and if your ADC or your support just wants to sit back and play super passive, it sucks. But it is what it is. Some games are just going to be like that, and it's fine, and you can't really do anything about it. The only thing you can really do is just match their positioning and wait to punish your opponent's mistakes. But now, this has been a long video, but let's end with the most explosive matchup in bot lane here. Melee versus melee. As we've already mentioned, the first step is fighting for early push, as these matchups are often extremely explosive, with both engaged supports racing to hit level 2, where they actually become useful. If you're winning the push, you should already be looking for the engage before the level up happens, so you can punish them instantly. But if you're about to lose it, back off, concede, wait for levels to equalize exactly as if you were against ranged. The big difference in this type of matchup is that ADCs matter a whole lot more. Even if you're able to find the engage, it doesn't mean it's always going to be smart to take it. Let me drive this point home. In this game, we have Nautilus Jinx versus Leona Smolder. Leona starts off with an engage on the Nautilus once both sides hit level 2, which at this point looks fairly even. Only Leona makes a huge mistake here. She looks for the re-engage. Why this is bad is because Smolder has Deathfire Touch, so rather than all-ins, he wants short poke trades to maximize his rune, whereas Jinx has lethal tempo, so the longer this brawl goes on, the better it gets. And with it fully stacked, she makes quick work of Leona, and then Nautilus cleans up Smolder for the double. And thinking about runes here is a very easy way to determine whether you win or lose an all-in, which is something that we do cover in both the laning blueprint chapter of our ADC Essentials, as well as the simple trick to understanding every matchup in our support course. Let's give it a watch. Out here, there's 9 potential keystones that you're going to see in the bot lane. There's Conqueror, Lethal Tempo, PTA, Fleet Footwork, Arcane Comet, Deathfire Touch, First Strike, and to a lesser extent, Dark Harvest and Hail of Blades. Especially in the early levels, which are most important, mind you, your ADC's runes make up the majority of your strength as a duo. All of these can be put on a scale, and they can be grouped into 3 distinct categories that are going to make playing out your lane phase just a whole lot easier. Okay, so there's the Ramp Up runes, which are Lethal Tempo and Conqueror, the Burst runes, which are Press the Attack and Hail of Blades, and then the One Tap runes, which is Fleet, First Strike, DFT, Arcane Comet, and Dark Harvest. If your ADC has either of these ramp-up runes, you're going to be heavily favored in the fights that go on longer. If they have either of the burst runes, a general game plan you should have is to take a quick trade and then just get out, and repeat this until you can actually finish them off. Now, right at the bottom of that scale is the one-tap runes, where you typically want to avoid all-ins, as your ADC is looking to just poke as much as possible, at least until they're low enough for you to fight. And to understand why all of this is so important for you as the support, let's jump straight into an example here. In this lane, we have Comet Varus with Blitzcrank versus Lethal Tempo Ashe and her support, Sona. Now, watch what Blitz does. He heads to the bush and is instantly looking for a hook on Ashe, and somehow snipes a crazy one through the minions as she's walking the lane. But little did he know, Blitzcrank, with this one hook, just lost the early lane for both himself and Varus. Check this out. Remember, Varus has Comet and Ashe has Lethal Tempo. So although he landed the hook and got that initial chunk of damage, they actually lose this all in, Varus having to flash away, and then both having to return to base. Look, by the way, that was only a small snippet of that video. We also cover 6 other videos in both support and ADC chapters covering just the lane phase alone. And all of that is packed into just a single chapter of our 4-part ADC Essentials course or our 5-part Support Essentials course. So if you want to climb fast on ADC or support this season, this is exactly what you've been looking for, as it covers everything you would ever need to smurf every stage of the game. Try it out completely risk-free too as if you don't climb at least 5 divisions while actively using our service, you'll get your money back, no questions asked. Access all of this and more right now using the special one-time discount link you can only unlock in the description or pinned comment below. What the heck are you waiting for, man? Finally get the rank you've always wanted this season. For now, thanks for watching, good luck in your games, and we'll see ya in the next video.